Good evening, guys. Welcome back to Ansarkari. So let's start our today's discussion that is for 14th of December, and we'll be having a discussion from two newspapers, that is The Hindu and the Financial Express. So we see that yesterday only we saw that the Chinese soldiers they were trying to change the LAC status quo, that is line of actual control status quo, and there was no casualties, and it happened in the Tawang region. So that is one thing. Then you should be knowing about Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Moving ahead. So here we should be knowing about the swim swap fraud, how people they get tricked into such things which leads to huge amounts of financial loss to them. So under this SIM swap fraud, a SIM swap it is a type of account takeover fraud in which criminals they gain the access to victims' phone. So they gain access to all your important details, and in such a way they're able to get the OTP of your account, and it leads to debit of huge amounts of money from your account. So they manage to get the personal information of a potential target through phishing. That is, they can send you such we can say such links through emails. Wishing is fraudulent phone calls. Then you have smishing, which is through fake text messages. So do not get tricked into all these things, and they then use all the personal information to create a fake ID. They impersonate the victim and trick the telephone service provider into issuing a duplicate SIM card to them, and which leads to deactivation of the SIM card which is already active. So through this they start, they get the OTP, and that's how they get successful in their fulfilling in their motives. So you need to be careful about all these things. Then moving ahead, from the editorial section, we'll be discussing the two bills, that is, one is the Forest Rights Conservation Act and the Wildlife Protection Act. So a conservation bill that endangers the forest rights. So here the conservation bill is the Wildlife Protection Act. So recently, the Wildlife Protection Amendment Bill 2021 has been passed, and this act it safeguards the numerous species of wild animals and plants by prohibiting all forms of hunting, and more importantly creating inviolate areas where wildlife conservation may be carried out. So basically this article is focusing upon how the provisions of the Wildlife Protection Act leads to, we can say, violation of rights which are conferred under the Forest Rights Protection Act, which are given to the tribal community, to the people who inhabited such areas, and they are given the rights under that act. So we will be seeing that through a study which has been conducted in the state of Madhya Pradesh by the Criminal Justice and Police Accountability Project. They recorded that the offense records of the police and the forest department in Madhya Pradesh, it found that persons from the oppressed caste communities, such as the scheduled tribes and other forest dwelling communities, they formed the majority of the accused persons in the wildlife related crimes. Then over 95% of the cases filed by the forest department, they are still pending, and hunting offenses that were primarily filed against schedule 3 and schedule 4 animals, basically the animals which have lesser protection than tigers and elephants, they formed over around, we can say, 17.5% of the animals hunted between 2016 and 20. Then forest rights, individual and collective. As part of the Forest Right Act, they were put in place to correct the injustice meted out by the forest governance laws in recognizing the forest dependent livelihoods. So this is also one thing which has been focused, and it is saying that fishing, which forms an important part of the subsistence for the tribal communities, it has come to be regularly criminalized as part of the Wildlife Protection Act. So that's how we can say the rights which are conferred by the Forest Rights Conservation Act to to the tribal community, how those things they become, we can say, a part of crime under the Wildlife Protection Act. So we can say there needs to be a coordination, and these two acts need to work in synergy so as to ensure that wildlife is also protected and the tribal communities' rights, the forest dwelling communities' rights are also not violated. So in cases which were recorded by the forest department as noted above, the very fact that these occurred in the protected areas, it led to the offense becoming punishable by 3 to 7 years. So that is again the same thing which I just talked about. And fear, it is a crucial way in which the department mediates the governance in protected areas, and its officials, they're rarely checked for their power. So basically officials posted in the respective areas, they also misuse their power, and unchecked discretionary policing allowed by the Wildlife Protection Act and other forest legislations, they have stunted the emancipatory potential of the Forest Rights Act. Then any further amendments must take stock of the wrongful cases and resultant criminalization of the rights and lives of the forest dwelling communities. So this thing has been emphasized in this article. Now, I hope that you've understood this. Now, talking about the rise of rural manufacturing over the past 2 decades. So manufacturing sector in India, it has been a shift. We have seen a shift of the manufacturing activities and employment from bigger cities to smaller towns in rural areas. So, firstly, you should be knowing about that such a shift has happened and it is happening. Then, when we look at the data from the annual survey of industries for 2019-20, shows that the rural segment is a significant contributor to the manufacturing sector's output. And while 42% of the factories they are in rural areas, 62% of the fixed capital is also in rural areas. So that is the figure that we can say. And in terms of output and value addition, the rural factories they have contributed to exactly half of the total sector. So that's how the share has grown when we talk about the rural sector's contribution to manufacturing output through value and we can say volume. And in terms of employment also, it accounts for 44% of the total employment that is created in the manufacturing sector, and but it had only a 41% share when it comes to total wages of the sector. So that's how it is. And rural areas, they have generally been more attractive to manufacturing firms because of, we can say, the low cost of the factors of production. Yesterday only we talked about what are the factors of production when we talk about them in economic sense. So the firms are also attracted to rural areas because the wages, the property, and the land cost, they are all lower than in most metropolitan areas. So that is one of the, we can say, cost advantages to the manufacturing firms when it comes to rural areas. And broadly, there could be three explanations. So there are broadly, we can say, three main reasons behind the shift toward the rural areas. So the first one is the factory floor space supply constraints. They're absent in rural areas, and obviously there is so much of congestion in urban areas. And also obviously the cost is also high, so that's why this is one main advantages towards the rural shift. The second one is the production cost differentials that exist. So many firms they experience substantially higher operating cost in cities than in rural areas, or we can say low cost of the factors of production in rural areas. Third reason is the possibility of capital restructuring. So what do we mean by capital restructuring in this context? So this is an approach advocated by the radical and the Marxist geographers. According to them, there is a tendency for growing capital accumulation and centralization of large multi-plant corporations, and big firms deliberately they shift production from cities to take advantage of the availability of less skilled, less unionized, and less costly rural labor. So that's how we can say, because of these three things, they are, in a way, they are trying to restructure their capital and obviously take benefit of it. Then When we talk about what the challenges faced by these manufacturing firms and factories in rural areas, so there are broadly two major challenges. The first one is the firms, although they reap the benefits of lower cost via lower rents that they have to pay, the low cost of capital, it seems, but when it comes to the cost of capital, that seems to be higher for the firms which are operating in rural side. And the second challenge is there exists an issue of skill shortage. Although we can say the labor is less costly or it is cheaper in rural areas, but when it comes to the skills, they lack the skills. And in rural areas, obviously, manufacturing and it obviously manufacturing, it needs a skilled labor force, is it needs skilled manpower. So that is, we can say, one of the challenges in rural areas, and obviously the firms, they are not able to sustain their competitive edge because of this, and their cost advantage vanishes over time also. So a more educated and skilled rural workforce will establish rural areas comparative advantage of low wages, high reliability and productivity, and hasten the process of movement out of agriculture to higher earning livelihoods. So we can say there is a win-win situation when it comes to setting up of manufacturing firms in rural areas, because firstly it will also be able to, can say, take out the surplus labor from the agricultural sector and deal with the problem of the disguised unemployment which exists there, and also shift people to more higher earning livelihood opportunities, creation of more employment opportunities also. So moving ahead, so we see a casual approach of government over setting up the disability centers. So the government has an aim to establish one a district disability rehabilitation center in every district of the country. That is the target. However, when it comes to the real and the effective implementation, which is obviously, we can say, it lacks, and we need to ensure that things are done in a much quicker manner with proper planning and monitoring. Then talking about the we are celebrating 105th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo. So Prime Minister, he talked about him, and he was a poet philosopher who had modern thoughts and high consciousness and uncompromising nationalism showed by him. It inspired India's leadership role in the world in greater measure. And he was born in Bengal. And Sri Aurobindo, along with Swami Vivekananda and Mahatma Gandhi, they were the three icons whose lives and contributions around the same period they shaped the destiny of nation. So these are the words of our Prime Minister. And talking about the Citizenship Act. So a constitution bench has listed a series of long pending petitions which have challenged Section 6A of the Citizenship Act of 1955, so which allows a citizenship to illegal immigrants, mostly from neighboring Bangladesh, who have entered Assam before March 1971. So several petitions have been filed in Supreme Court against this Section 6A of the Citizenship Act, challenging challenging giving citizenship to such illegal immigrants. And when we talk about the Assam Accords, which were signed in August 1985 by the then Rajiv Gandhi government with the leaders of the Assam movement to preserve and protect the Assamese culture, heritage, linguistic, and social identity. And under Section 6A, foreigners who had entered Assam before 1st January 1966 and they've been ordinarily resident in the state, they would have all the rights and obligations of citizens, which also includes right to vote. So this is one thing. And the second condition is those who had entered the state between January 1, 1966 and 25th March 1971, they would have the same rights and obligations, except that they would not be having the right to vote for 10 years. So you need to remember these two conditions. They can directly be asked in prelims. And petitions, they were filed challenging the discriminatory nature of Section 6A. And petitioners, they've argued that the special provision was in violation of Article 6 of our Constitution that fixed the cutoff date for granting citizenship to immigrants as July 19, 1948. So that is, we can say, one of the contradictions that has been challenged in the Supreme Court by a number of petitioners, and all of those petitions have been clubbed together and they've been listed for January 10, 2023. So let's see what is going to be the Supreme Court's take on this. In talking about the solar energy, so only 1/4 of the sanctioned solar projects they have taken off. So again, we've always been seeing the complaints of late implementation and the cost, we can say the cost overruns because of such delays when it comes to implementation of such projects. And some solar parks, they were cancelled also due to slow progress, and other hurdles also includes like a difficulty in acquiring the land. Then we have environmental issues also, and there was halt in the economic activity owing to the pandemic. So these were certain factors, and few projects were cancelled. So not a good development, we can say, and we need to ensure that things, they happen in a quick and planned manner. Talking about the mRNA technology, basically it concerns or it is related to vaccines. So we should be knowing about what is mRNA technology. So messenger RNA, it is a molecule within cells that carries instructions to form proteins, and scientists, they can design them to make a particular protein in the body that can help fight viruses and other illnesses, basically building up our immunity against such viruses and diseases. So that's how mRNA works. And that's it from the Hindu. Let's take up Financial Express. So in Financial Express, in yesterday's newspaper also, we saw that the October's index of industrial production data, it shows changing private consumption trend. So when we look at this blue bar diagrams for consumer durables, we see that the demand for consumer durables has fallen from 129.5 to 109.7. So this is basically comparing it on yearly basis. So 129 was in October 2021, and it has fallen to 109 this year. And when we look at the demand for consumer non-durables also, even that has fallen again for the same period. So you can find out more about the details of IIP. And coming to what is the view of our the economists. So Aditi Nair, she said that to some extent the muted exports, they have also dragged down the consumer and the capital goods in the month of October this year. And export weakness is a likely, or we can say, the major contributors behind the slowing demand also. So moving ahead, we'll be having one editorial to discuss. So in the editorials, it concerns with the economic growth. What should be the character? What should be the, we can say, the defining features of our future economic growth? So many adjectives, they have been used to describe India's growth story so far. But to realize its full potential, the country must tackle three hurdles. So three hurdles are clearly mentioned over here. The first one is ensuring robust growth financing. Second is the skilling question. Third is the rampant inequality. So we need to deal with inequality, rising inequality. So these are the three broader heads. And among the drivers of growth in the coming years, they are India's strength in IT sector and the opportunity of climate change technology. So these are the two opportunities also in front of us. And somewhere in the middle is a balance between growth and equity, in which all people matter, obviously, and as productive economic actors, but also just for being themselves. And access to finance and education and limits on power can be ends as well as means. So India's turn will come if its leaders can realize the need for balance and inclusiveness. So that will be a South Asian miracle. So that's how we are, like, we have these three major things that we need to focus upon. We have two opportunities. So we need to ensure reduction in inequality. We need to ensure growth in financing. We need to ensure that we are able to skill our manpower, our human resource. So that's it for today. Thank you for joining Ansarkari. I'll meet you tomorrow, and do not forget to subscribe to our channel Ansarkari, and also do not forget to hit the like button for this video. And also you'll be getting the link of the PDF in the description box, so you can go through that as well. Thank you so much.